Um, okay, so we get going. Um, Thanks for doing this, first of all.
Sure.
Um,
Thank you.
you're, I think you're one of those types of people that I don't know what I expected, but like I messaged thinking like, "Oh, he's never going to even see that. Never mind reply to it." And then when you wrote back saying, "Yeah, sure, I'd love to," I was like, "Oh shit." I think I've definitely developed, um, like a really bad radar for what people are like. You know that you kind of have this assumption of someone like, ah, they probably never see this message, they'll never reply. And they're always the ones I get wrong. And the ones where I'm like, oh, they're really engaged with everyone. They'll definitely want to do it. They're the ones that are like, oh, I don't know, I'll see if I have time or whatever. So no, I really appreciate you giving up your time.
Same here. I'm glad this worked out. Thanks for having me.
Um, my pleasure. So I tend to start off nice and easy. Are you a coffee aficionado?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. And are you like snobby about it, or are you like whatever's going you'll take?
No, super snobby. Like to a point where, when I'm traveling internationally and I have to walk 3 miles to get to a Starbucks, if that's the best coffee I can get, then actually I do that.
Mm,
And Mark is my business partner, is always laughing about that because we literally had times in China traveling together where I would go out of the way just to get my coffee before any meetings in the morning.
mm,
But I'm kind of a cold brew guy now. I make my own cold brew. I just actually started experimenting with some new beans that I ordered. I order everything on Amazon. We're a
mm.
little bit rural here, so it's hard to go places and buy stuff. So, but I make my own coffee and let it sit there for 2 days. Put it in the fridge. Drink it
Yeah.
cold. It's awesome.
Yeah, cold brew is huge in America. Cold brew and nitro. Nitro is like the
Yep.
new like more expensive cold brew, but like
Yeah.
yeah, there's no market for it here because like it's I don't know, like I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it's pretty brisk here, like most of the time. Like high 20s Celsius will be like, Jesus, it's fairly hot in the middle of the summer. Like, so I don't think there'd be much of a market for nitro. Nobody'd be ordering tanks of nitro to make coffee, like.
No, I also think, I mean, being from Austria, right? That's where I grew up. There's such an ingrained coffee culture. Like, I think the first time you saw that happening in the States was basically when Starbucks created, their stores where you could
Mm,
hang out and sit and drink coffee, which is not even remotely similar to what the experience is going into a coffee house in Austria, right?
yeah.
Or in Germany, or in a lot of other places in Ireland, probably too, where you've had hundreds of years of, this like cultural growth in that respect. And these
Mm,
coffee houses feel like they could have been there a couple hundred years ago. So I think it's very established there. And I think there's also, because of that, there's probably a little bit less room for experimentation. I think people
yeah.
are just so, it's part of their culture, and some stuff comes in sometimes that's new and unexpected, but in general it's a little bit more conservative, I think. To your point.
Yeah, yeah. I love hearing about guests' coffee memories. So they this started off as like the intention of it was like, oh, have you ever had an amazing cup of coffee that stuck with you? And then it quickly turned into like, oh well, actually it wasn't a great cup of coffee, but I was with this person and this happened while we were having coffee, or I was in this place, or I heard this news or whatever. Is there anything that springs to mind for you?
Man, that's a really good question. You know how you remember like smell and taste is like one, I think your sense of smell has some of the strongest memories, right?
Mm,
It brings you back to places and also places in time when you were little sometimes.
mm,
I don't know if it was the best coffee, but I used to do a lot of camping and outdoor trips, and I was in the army in Austria. It's mandatory service there, right? So I did that for a year, and became really good friends with this guy. And so when we were done, we said, "Listen, we just want to chill for a month." So we went to Finland for over a month and rented a kayak for 3 weeks, and basically went
uh,
into the wilderness, just the two of us, kayaking. Didn't see one. I think we saw one person in 3 weeks. Drank water out of the lakes. Gathered mushrooms and berries and brought a little bit of food. And part of it was coffee.
yeah.
And it was always this. We didn't have a lot to do other than making fire every day and getting to the next island. So we kept ourselves busy with these rituals, and making coffee was one of these rituals. It wasn't the best coffee,
Yeah.
but the process of making the fire, putting the pot on, like we didn't have a lot of it, so we had to be very conservative with how much we consumed. But that experience, it was coffee, it was a sip of whiskey a day, and I think we had one piece of chocolate. That's how much room we had in the kayak. So, but you really appreciated every single bit of all of these, right? Just because you couldn't have more. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Um, with podcast then, so I know you did Behind the Horns with NoBull.
Yeah.
How did that decision come about to start? Like, why use the medium of podcast, and how did you find the experience of actually like recording and releasing episodes?
So that's a really good question. I actually just talked to my kids about that because they were like, "Oh, are you recording for Behind the Horns?" I'm like, "No, we actually haven't recorded in a while. I'm guest on somebody else's." But it, I think to your point about replying to your DM as well, right? I grew up in corporate America from a professional perspective. I've been part of a lot of like big, multi-billion-dollar companies. I was creative director at Reebok for a long time. And when you're higher up in those companies, you're very removed from your customers.
Yeah.
It's like customer service is a department that sits somewhere, right? I was a designer and creative director. You barely interact with that department. When you launch a brand yourself, all of a sudden you are everything, right? In the beginning, it was Marcus and I, who is a really, really good friend of mine, and we met at Reebok and we started this together. It was literally just the two of us. And we had Todd, who is now a VP of marketing, helping out in the beginning as, we couldn't even pay him, and we paid him a little bit, and he was a consultant. So it was a very small team. And you do everything, right? You become
Yeah.
customer service, you become the shipping department, you create all the content. Whether you qualified for it or not is a different story. But we learned everything from the ground up, and as part of that, you are the face of the company, right? Now you can't really hide.
Mhm.
You're public, you're out there, and it was us communicating with people. So by nature, I don't even think I had an Instagram account before we launched this because I just didn't see a need for it. And all of a sudden it became everything,
Mhm.
and that became our community, and that's how we talk to our customers. And sometimes they were really positive and encouraging messages, and otherwise others had a problem with the product, right? But we saw it all and still do. So because of that, I feel like we're very connected personally. Also, obviously our team is big enough, but personally still very connected with our community. And out of that came the kind of the urge or the idea to, why don't we talk to some of these people, right?
Yeah.
Whether they're athletes, other entrepreneurs, people that inspire us. Um, so we recorded a bunch of episodes. I think we hit the pause button a couple of months ago, obviously because of COVID as well. But one reason was Marcus and I did it together. And there were some guests where we could tell he was super excited to talk to them. And I was just, tagging. They were all exciting, but it was maybe not my forte
Mm.
or my area of expertise. So I can see him getting much more excited than I was. And vice versa. If we talk to other people, all of a sudden I was in my element, and I was like, oh my God, geeking out. So I think what we're going to do is kind of restart it again, but maybe have it as a separate entity. So I would talk to people more that are my, field of expertise, my background, which is more brand, content, design. That's what I really get excited about.
Yeah.
And not that he's not, but he has a very different skill set from me. There's some overlap, but I think we'll restart it and kind of break it up a little bit. But it's
Yeah.
hard doing a podcast. I admire you because you got to get into rhythm. You can't really pause it, and especially if you have a full-time job like you do,
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing to do.
I tell you though, I was getting goosebumps there when at the start when you were talking about like when you start a brand and you're like the point of contact for everyone, and you have to be like available and whatever. I fucking love that. Like
Yeah.
I
Oh,
love getting messages, even really stupid messages, like small little, like there'd be a few people every week who have listened since like the very first episode, who will
mhm.
message saying like really good episode this week, and that fucking makes my day when I get a message like
Does,
that,
right?
just like one, like. And
Yep.
then there are days where you're like, oh God, it's hard, like do I have time now, because like we've a baby as well, so it's like, oh, I
Oh
feel kind of
wow.
guilty now, like missing bath time to talk to someone. And then but then you start thinking like, well, it's fucking James Hobart, like it's fine, you know, I'll sacrifice like one bath time and then make it up later on. Like, you know, you kind of, I think it really resonated with me there what you were saying about like the, you know, that kind of, I think it's very similar to coaching in a way. From like a few people that I've talked to are like, you need to really want to help people and want to coach in order to coach, because like chances are you're not going to make your fortune out of it. Like you're going to scrape by a lot of the time. You're going to have like shitty mornings where it's wet and cold and you don't want to get up. You're going to be on your own opening the shutters of the gym or whatever. Like the hard days are really hard. Like, and I
Yeah.
think you need to really want to start something if you're going to start something, because I think if you kind of dip your toe and you're like, oh, maybe I'll see, like it's already done, like it's not gonna, you know, you need to hit the ground running and be, you know, be kind of passionate about it, I suppose.
Oh, 100%.
um when you're interviewed yourself, then is that something that you enjoy, or like which side of the mic would you rather be on? Would you rather be asking or answering?
Uh,
I suppose with podcasts it's kind of different because it's more conversationally rather than, you know, you're not being bombarded with questions so much as like kind of chatting. So it's probably a little bit easier, I guess.
yeah, I think if you look at it as a conversation, I'm very comfortable with both sides, but I think I'm probably more comfortable answering questions than asking them, because I do think that's a different skill set, right? I mean, you have to know what you're doing to get into somebody's like brain and soul, and pull out of them what other people might find interesting listening to, and that's not everybody has that, and I don't know if I have it, right?
I don't know
um,
if I do either.
when Marcus when Marcus and I talk to each other, that's easy because we're so connected and we have such a great relationship. But with other people that I don't know as well, there has to be a certain chemistry, right?
Mm.
Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not there, and that has an effect on how you ask questions, how you answer them. So I would never say I'm a great podcast host. I have a lot to learn there, and we've only done a couple, and I have a
Yeah.
lot of respect for people that do it well. It takes a special skill set, that's for sure.
Were you nervous then? Like say when you have, so say I think was it the second or third episode you had Rory on, like
Yeah.
are you, like I was really nervous talking to him because like I was essentially doing his job to him in front of
No,
him while interviewing him, and you
it's
get
just
really
so
like, oh
awesome.
Jesus, what if I ask a stupid question? Like he's gonna think I'm a dope. Like do you get nervous with some of the, even though you know the people well?
Yeah, no, not really, because again, if it's a conversation, right?
Mm,
And there's genuine interest. I mean, Rory's an awesome guy, and when he helped us last year with the games, and he was kind of the voice of NoBull at the games, and helped us talk to people, that he's just so good at it, and he puts you
mm,
at ease.
mm.
Just like sitting with him, it's so easy to talk because he's just so good at it, and he makes you feel very comfortable, right?
He's a
If that makes
handsome
sense.
fucker as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Are there
100.
are there shows that you enjoy listening to then? Do you listen to podcasts yourself?
Yeah, actually, I'm really big on Rich Roll right now. I just love, the diversity of stuff that he brings. I used to do a lot of triathlons. I mean, he's a triathlete, ultra distance runner. He's done some amazing running and long distance events. I definitely connect with him in regards to the topics that he picks and the people that he
Mm,
talks to. That's probably the biggest one I listen to. Obviously, occasionally, everything. Like I listen to doctors, CrossFit
yeah.
podcasts, Joe Rogan. I mean, there's lots of different ones, but if I had to pick one right now, it's probably Rich Roll that is kind of at the top of the playlist.
Yeah, I can edit in, I can dub in the name of this show every time you say that show anyway, so it'll sound like you're talking.
Yeah. Nice.
It's like, well, right now I'm listening to Coffee Pods and Wads. I'll just be really poorly dubbed in.
I wake up to it. It's my lunch break before dinner.
So we'll track back to something you said earlier on there. You were Reebok's global creative director, and Marcus was the head of brand
Yep.
strategy.
Yep.
Like these are all terms I don't even understand what the role would probably be. But like, what drove the decision to set out on your own path? Like, what was it a case of, you know, did you just spot a gap in the market? Was it just kind of that lack of creative control maybe that you had? Is it, you know, that when I think of brands like Reebok, I often think of like, you know, a camel as a horse designed by a committee. Like, was there an aspect of that about it?
100%.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not dissing Reebok. I think
No,
Reebok's a
yeah,
great,
yeah.
Yeah, great company. I still have a ton of friends that work there, still work, that have been there forever. There's a lot of talent there, but it is a big corporation, right? So there's lots of layers. And to your point about lots of cooks in the kitchen, especially at a global level, when you have different markets come in and everybody wants the brand to look different for their
Mm,
specific country because every country is different and consumers are different. So it does become very political. But I think most importantly, I've always had the urge to do something. I never knew who to do it with. And that was kind of when I met Marcus. Marcus was actually one of the reasons I left Puma at the time to go to Reebok and take a job there. When I interviewed for the job at Reebok, which was a different job at the time, Marcus was going to be my counterpart on the team, and so he interviewed me, and it was an amazing conversation. I immediately hit it off with him. I just had so much respect for him and immediate trust,
mm,
and we worked together at Reebok for roughly 2 years. Then he left way before me, but we stayed in touch and we remained friends. And at some point along the way, we started talking about, hey, what if we did something together? That was really the trigger more than anything else. Um, but you're totally right. Like I went to design school. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I have a degree from Europe, from Austria. But then I went into product design. Went to school again in New York and Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. And I always knew I wanted to be a designer. And as cool as that job sounds, global creative director at Reebok, which was responsible for all of product design globally, footwear, apparel, accessories, licensed businesses. Um, it just became a lot of meetings and
yeah.
less about creativity and more about politics, right? And that's not a Reebok specific issue. I think that happens in big corporations,
Mm,
unless they're really driven by ultra creative people from the top, meaning CEO, CMO, right? If you have leadership that 100% supports like creativity and the integrity of creativity, then I think you can find it at bigger companies.
mm.
But in general, the more layers, the harder it is to maintain that, right? And so when Marcus and I started talking about what are we going to do together, and then me also at some point feeling like I'm not really creative anymore, we just pulled the ripcord in 2012 and said, let's screw this. It's just totally naive. We're not the youngest anything. We're not 25, no kids, like both of us married with multiple kids. And basically,
I thought you were going to say married with multiple wives there for a second.
yeah,
That'd be a very
multiple.
different.
No,
That's
no,
a
no.
very
Still
different story.
happily married, first wife, but no, I have three boys, right? And
Yeah.
um, two of them were 2 years old when we basically said, hey, we're gonna, you know, get rid of our paychecks, all the perceived security, right?
Mm.
And start something without investors, by the way, like
So
all.
did you know, like when you walked out of Reebok, was NoBull a thing? Was the idea of clothes and shoes a thing, or was it just
No,
I'm going to do something, I just don't know what it is yet?
we knew what it was when we actually said we're going to do this. We knew what it was, but it had nothing to do with NoBull. It was a
Oh,
cold
this
water
is
surf brand,
yeah, the surf thing. Yeah,
which in Ireland
yeah.
we actually did have customers in Ireland, but it was a very small brand. It was I had a non-compete with Reebok. That was one reason, but it honestly Marcus and I did not sit down together and say let's do something else first and then start a training brand. It was let's do something together. What's the idea? And out of that came, I was passionate about, and still am, about surfing. Cold water surfing is a big thing here in New England. The waves are better when it's cold, usually in the winter.
Yeah.
And that was the initial trigger for us to say, okay, cool, now we have something. Maybe we can also help some clients with, some projects that they need help on and keep the lights on while we build the surf brand. And we had no idea what we were getting into. We were like, yeah, we'll just design some product, website, shoot some photos, and the people will come to us. Luckily, we had Instagram, which was already up and running in 2012. But still, we had, if we had started with NoBull, I think, I'm not sure if it would have been as successful because we learned a lot of lessons those first couple of years
Well, you would have been
before.
sued by Reebok straight off the bat for
Yeah.
your non compete.
No, and also, the other thing that we were really proud of is we didn't want to call in any favors, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we obviously had an extensive professional network, but We found all our factory partners ourselves, most of it through Googling, resources and eventually making a connection. We didn't use our previous jobs as kind of a, hey, can you help me out here or there? It
Mm.
was all completely separate from what we had done before. And we really approached this as we approached it as our project, right? Where there was Surfright and then eventually NoBull. This is our baby, and we're gonna, roll our sleeves up and do this from the ground up. And it felt great. It felt amazing doing
Yeah.
all that.
I think like what were the early days like? So like, okay, I'm guessing there was like a shit ton of passion, like loads of ideas, loads of
Yep.
energy, but maybe like treading water a little bit where it was like, spinning in place, like trying to get things moving, but maybe
Yeah.
if especially if you're not utilizing contacts that you have built up, like was there any trepidation with it? Was there any nerves of like shit, like what if this doesn't go, like what if NoBull doesn't go anywhere, like?
Every day.
Yeah.
And that's my recommendation for any entrepreneur or potential entrepreneur listening. If you want to start something, if I had been on my own, I think I would have folded multiple times along the way,
Mm.
because you don't know, right? And by the way, we didn't start NoBull because we saw a market niche and we knew that there was an opportunity. Again, we were completely ignorant. We said, okay, we know how to make shoes and apparel. We do CrossFit. We love going to CrossFit boxes and working out. That was our thing. Why don't we start a brand around that, right? Obviously, we couldn't say CrossFit, but that's how it started. It wasn't like, okay, Reebok is this big in CrossFit, and Nike didn't even have the Metcon when we started talking about NoBull. They launched the Metcon the same month we launched NoBull as a brand, right? So we had no idea. But there was
Thanks,
not a lot
Nike.
of, yeah, it was actually great because it validated the sport. We were
Yeah,
pumped,
yeah.
but there was not a lot of like data and thinking behind it. It was very kind of gut feel and passion for the sport, for the community, and basically using our skill set to make a difference there. But there were a lot of moments, going back to this being self-funded and us putting all of our savings, second mortgages, if we put everything on the line. And we hit rock bottom a couple times, right? Where it's like, okay, can we really write another check for another mold, right? For order more, work with this factory on potentially getting T-shirts ready and things like that. I mean, every time you do something like that, especially in footwear, those are huge checks that you have to write, and
Mm.
it was all coming from our personal accounts. So if we hadn't balanced each other out in those moments where I was like, dude, I can't do this anymore. I can't risk our family's, future. Marcus was always there to talk me out of it again, right? And
Mm.
be like, okay, let's hold on. And then vice versa. I think he's had some moments where I was like, dude, we're gonna get through this. So the partnership and the trust and respect for each other, I think, is what made this work.
Yeah.
Um, if I hadn't had it, if I had been on my own, I think this would not have happened.
You should have used sweatshops. Way cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
No, but jokes aside, I think that industry, like just from a factory perspective, I think a lot has changed.
mm,
It's not perfect by any means,
mm,
but we have an amazing development partner. They're not internal. It's a company run by a brother and sister team. Now the brother is a little bit less involved now, but Sabrina works with us, and she grew up in this industry. She's half Taiwanese, half American, and from an ethical standpoint, she does all the research on that, but we also made sure that we toured all the factories before we placed POs.
yeah.
We toured everyone and talked to everyone. So do those things still exist? Absolutely. But I think the footwear industry in general has come a long way over the last couple of decades
Mm.
in a positive way.
When you skip through the time that Noble has been around, like from like, okay, you talk about those dark days or the low ebbs, but like from the outside looking in, it seems like a incredibly meteoric rise from like a startup to, like to cornering part of the market and muscling in on, like, I suppose, like Nike was new in the space, but like they've got such clout behind them and such recognizability or whatever that it's
Mhm.
like it was pretty much like a 49-49-2 split
Yeah,
between like Reebok, Nike, and then basically
yeah,
everyone else.
yeah,
Like you've gone from nothing to making that, I suppose, a somewhat three-way split, maybe like
Hmm.
larger in their favor, I suppose, just because, like we said, the clout that they have.
Yeah.
But now you got this incredible roster of athletes. Like you've got, three of the female finalists at the games. You got Jared, you got Sam, you got Brandon in Australia. We had him on recently. You've had the podcast, you've had a film festival, you sent Rory to the games in an airstream. Like there must be days where you struggle to comprehend like
Yeah.
where you are from where you started.
I mean, yeah, from the outside looking in, it's all smooth sailing and just like this. And it has been, I mean, it's humbling, honestly. I'm still, every time we think about it and step back, we don't take this for granted, right?
Mm,
It's been amazing, the support that we've been getting. But there were definitely a couple of moments along the way where they were either, like insanely positive and encouraging, or extremely scary and holy shit, this all could go away, right? And
yeah.
they're not as extreme anymore now. I think it's kind of slowly leveling out a little bit, but we still have moments where we're like, okay, you know what, this could become a big problem. Cash flow is always a big issue, right? But when we launched, I don't know if you know that story, but we were literally, so this was January 2015 at the East Coast Championships in Boston, a CrossFit competition that no longer exists. Ben Bergeron had set it up, an
Mm,
awesome event. And we had a little booth there and we were launching the brand there. And I think literally, and this is not a joke, like either half an hour, 15 minutes before we were supposed to go live with the footwear on the website, we got an email from our factory partner basically saying, hey, the shoes that you thought were going to come in a couple of weeks are actually coming in a couple of months, right? We had a, so this is Chinese New Year is a big holiday in China.
mm,
Our factory, footwear factory is based in, or factories are based in China. And if you don't make production before that window, which is usually around February, March, then you basically, it takes a month or 2 months longer because the factories wind down, they have to ramp up
mm,
again. So long story short, we had to make a decision. We could either pull the launch, or we could just say, hey, we're still launching, but we just can't send our customers the shoes in a couple of weeks. It's going to be a couple months. And we gave people the option to, back out of orders. Um, once they ordered and they saw that it's going to take a while, I said, no questions asked. If you want money back. Nobody wanted the money back, so we still went ahead and launched. We updated the website. Todd was literally in the middle of the night doing that and saying, okay, the delivery date is this, it's not that. Some people don't see that right when they order. They could just get really excited, and that's where the refund policy comes in. If you want to back out, no questions asked, we can do that. But it was overwhelming by how many people still bought it was shoes at the time.
yeah.
Sight unseen, had never seen anyone wear the product. They had never seen the brand really before, unless they followed us on Instagram or saw it at that Boston event. And the orders started coming in that first night. And we were like, this is crazy. There's actually demand for this product. So it was super humbling. So we had sold out of that whole production run before we actually shipped the product to customers. So with that revenue that came in, we were able to place another PO with the same factory before they actually had finished making the other ones, right? So that got their attention, and all of a sudden they were like, okay, these guys are serious. But it took us until Black Friday that year to really realize how big the opportunity was. Like that moment, and we never give discounts. So Black Friday was the first time that we offered just black product, right?
Yeah.
And it was as simple as that, and it was limited, and you could only get it around that time frame. And it was just insane to see how many people wanted to be part of that. And that's when we finally then closed everything else down. So for that first year, 2015, we had a very small team, mostly focused on NoBull. We still had an agency or consultancy working with clients. I did still some design projects for clients that weren't competitive. We did, photography, marketing support for some clients. So later, 2015, we were able to finally finish off those projects because NoBull was just taking over.
Yeah.
And any time spent on a client was time spent not growing NoBull, right?
Yeah.
the surf brand also slowly fizzled out that year, and that felt amazing later in 2015 to then say, you know what, we're all in on NoBull, and let's make this happen. Not that that wasn't the attitude
Yeah, yeah.
before, but we were just stretched so thin. So it was definitely crazy those early years from a time perspective, and how much, how many weekends we spent, how many nights. But it felt exhilarating. It was fun to be doing everything.
Yeah. I think you mentioned Todd there a couple of times. Like, one thing I love about the brand that is the bizarre ad campaigns, like the the drawn out
Sorry, I have
long.
my puppy here. I don't know if you heard him bark.
Oh no, no problem. What kind of dog is it?
He's an Aussie Doodle.
Oh,
He's a
lift it
good
up
guy. He's
there.
an Australian Shepherd Poodle mix.
Can I see?
He's a good boy. Do you want to see him?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, come on. Here, let's say hi. Come
Oh,
say.
look at look at
He's a
his
big
little head.
boy. He's
Oh,
not really a small
lovely.
puppy anymore. He's like 55 pounds, but
So
he's a
woolly.
big boy.
That's cute. Um, yeah, these long drawn out, like conceptual, like weird alternate universe ad campaigns. Like, I think the first time I became conscious of NoBull was Alex Anderson retired
Mhm.
from like competing at CrossFit,
Yep.
and this he put up this post about like going fishing, and I was like, what? I was like, because I didn't know what NoBull was, and I didn't read the caption or anything. I was just kind of watching the video, and I was just like, Jesus, he's retiring. That's fucking insane. And then I was like, God, he, is he actually going fishing? And then I was like, is this an ad? Is he retiring? Is he fishing? Is this real? I was like, what is going on? But
Yeah.
like, I think people are like, I still think people are confused about whether Brooke has a coffee shop or not.
I know.
I think people are
Some people will be
confused.
too real. I know.
Yeah, it's like, does Jared really have a passion for flowers, and does he really own a florist? Like, they're incredibly memorable. Like, they really stick in your head, and it's funny. Like, I think it's easy to have loud music. It's easy to have, like, flashing lights, and like, you know, uh barbell slamming, and like a shoe spinning in a green screen. Like, it's easy to do that stuff and to have like a snazzy looking logo and stuff. But I think like the sheer effort and energy and the creativity to literally fashion a coffee shop with like a fully functioning barista bar for an advert, like
Yeah.
for a post, essentially. I think these weird realities are like next level. Is that something that like early on you were like, right, we need to be different, and this is how we're going to do it? Or has that kind of grown into its own, like morphed into its own thing?
It has. Yeah, that's a great question actually, and I appreciate that you find those interesting, because we're just having fun. So the
Mm,
most important thing is we don't take ourselves serious, like whether it comes to our social media as a brand, but also internally. If you were part of a staff meeting, which obviously now is on Zoom, they're they're serious, right? There's serious aspects to them, but they're also a lot of fun. People shoot the
yeah,
shit, nobody, including Marcus and I. And that's honestly that's what keeps me going. Like it keeps me young, it keeps me creative, and once I'm able to go back to work, it's fun to go to the office because nobody has an ego. Everybody's trying to make the job as fun as possible, and we built a really cool group of people working together. And the same is true for our athletes, right? We don't have a lot of athletes, but the reason we don't is we see them as team members, and we want to have a personal relationship with them. We
mm,
don't want them to take themselves too serious. None of them have an ego. They're competitive, and they're they're at the best level that you can get at in their respective sports. But they're awesome people, and they're fun to hang out with. And the fact that we can do something like Alex Anderson becoming an oyster farmer in Massachusetts, and having participated in that, or Jared putting on an apron and pretending to be a florist, it just speaks to their personality. But
yeah,
to your question, we didn't start NoBull saying we're going to make these campaigns happen. It's a reflection of how the team has grown internally, and how each person's personality has an effect on the brand, right? So we had a blueprint for the brand, and that's why we called it NoBull.
mm,
We wanted, from a product perspective, wanted to make sure that we got rid of all the gimmicks and all the crap that's on product and in product, that other brands tell you is going to make you a better athlete, right? Because we think that's bullshit. Like if you put on a pair of shoes, they're not going to make you fitter. They need to work with you and they need to last and be durable and stable and all that stuff that you need them to be. But the making yourself a better athlete needs to come from here.
Mm.
That's what should burn calories. That's what, should make you better as a person. That's your mindset and your effort that you put in. The product is just there for the ride.
Mm.
So these marketing campaigns where people say, well, if you put this on, you're going to be a better athlete. That's quite frankly not true, right? Because of this technology or that. So that's how we started. It was probably more kind of tactical in the beginning, a little bit more like black and white and tough, the brand. Um, but especially Todd, right? When he came on board and really took over marketing, we started having much more fun with these campaigns. Like Jared's Flower Shop was one of the first ones, right? And we were like, okay. And it wasn't like, let's make Jared a florist. It was, we're having a product idea because we don't have to take ourselves too serious. Not every shoe has to be army green and black. Let's have some fun. We started making shoes with floral patterns on them that didn't exist at the time within CrossFit, within the space. And we just wanted to have a fun story around it. So the first one we did, I don't know if that was actually 2000, might have been 2015 already. Jared was not part of that first campaign that we did, but then the year after, we had him as an athlete. And Todd came up with this concept to literally rent out an empty store south of Boston. We literally had the store for a couple of days, made a sign, somebody handmade a sign, like all of that was real, to a point when neighbors that lived in the area came in and
They're like, oh yeah, you got
flowers.
flowers.
So like, hey, that's awesome. There's finally a new store in here because it's been empty for a while. And Jared's standing in there half naked, pruning flowers. So, and that kind of kicked off, what you saw with Brooke, which I agree, a lot of people thought that was real, and Alex, a lot of people didn't realize that was, a joke.
I remember going into my gym and talking to my coach, being like, "Jesus, see, Alex Anderson retired," and he was like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, apparently he's going to be fishing oysters in." It's only like the next day I messaged him, being like, "Yeah, that was an ad, I think."
That's actually a friend of ours, that a really good friend of mine that I worked with at Puma and at Reebok a long time ago. She's a color designer, and it's their oyster farm. It's on the Cape south of Boston, and that's their part-time gig, and they're farming oysters there, and they let us shoot there, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. Todd put up another post recently of I think it was a picture with him with one of your first, like, kind of prototype backpacks. And he it was a long post about, like, explaining about all the jobs you guys had to juggle, and like you know, I suppose those kind of unsure moments that you talked about, where like maybe people weren't getting paid or weren't, it was like favors and calling in favors from friends and stuff. Like, there must be an enormous sense of gratification then when you see, like, say, those kind of ads getting the attention that they get, or even like more recently, like the Not Just an Influencer campaign, like those kind of things getting the I suppose the traction that they've gotten. It must be really, you must look back to the, like, say, that night of him taking the picture outside his office, like thinking like, oh, this is full circle, like it's amazing.
It is. And I think the biggest gratification that I get out of it is that the team is so buttoned up now that, my fingerprint and Marcus's fingerprint and Todd's in the beginning was on everything, because there was just nobody else to do it, right? So
Yeah.
when we launched, I did all the photography, all the videos. We didn't have a studio. We didn't have an office. We worked without an office for a long time, actually, until a couple of months into the launch in
That gives me
2015.
hope, because I'm currently sitting on a garden chair doing my interview.
Well,
So
that's better than what we had. We had plyo boxes. That was our first interviews. Actually, Jed, who is on our marketing team, we interviewed him in an empty warehouse, sitting on a plyo box, because we had no furniture. And for the first 2 years, we didn't have furniture. We made everything out of plywood sheets and whatever we had left over from events. So it was, and I'm not a trained photographer, right? So somehow we made it work in my garage with reflectors and snow shovels and broomsticks and whatever. And then I've let that go. Then we hired people to help us out with photography, but I was still involved in signing off on every photo from a composition standpoint, color correction, all that stuff. And then finally, a couple of years ago, I was like, I'm not really giving any more feedback. Whoa, did you hear that? Sorry.
yeah.
That was that was explosion number 3 today. So we're building a garage, and they have to blast ledge. So our
Oh,
kids
it's
are out there pulling the trigger on the dynamite every time it
oh, they're
happens.
doing it. Oh, amazing.
It's a little scary. I'm always looking for the house
But
to
at
fall.
least you know if they have the trigger, they're pretty far away from the blast
They
itself.
are, yeah. Under supervision, I have to
Yeah, they're not just out doing it themselves.
there's people that know what they're doing out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it, I think finally 2 years ago, I got a batch of like 200 photos to approve, right? And I went through it and I'm like, when is the last time I actually gave feedback, right? And I realized that I hadn't given feedback in a while, other than saying it's okay. So it felt great to be able to finally let that go, right? And that's just one example, but there's so many things coming from doing everything on our own to now having super talented designers, right? We have color designers now, we have graphic designers, apparel designers, footwear designers. A lot of them I've worked with in the past, but we have such a good chemistry on the team that I don't, in a lot of things I don't even see anymore, which is amazing. I'm still involved from a design perspective. I love that. I still mostly design shoes now and work with the team on that. But it's not in solitude, right? It's like I do something, we bounce ideas off each other, I get feedback from the team, I change some things. So I really see myself as part of the team there. And it's awesome that I don't have to be involved in everything anymore. And the same is true for Marcus. So that's been super rewarding.
Do you ever feel like worried of like diluting it too much? Like, you know, I know you were saying at the start that Reebok was like there's so many people's opinions and so many. Do you ever like worry when as the team obviously through necessity gets bigger because there's more roles to fill? Do you ever feel like, oh shit, are we going to end up with like too many cooks?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a danger with growth, right? And with layers and having more people come in. Um, I think the key to that is to have a clear definition of what the brand is about, right? And I think that's what other brands sometimes are struggling with, and especially Reebok. Again, not to like dwell on them, but they've gone through so many iterations of what the brand stands for, and none of them are wrong. But if you change too often,
Hmm.
as a consumer, when I see the logo, I'm like, what does it stand for, right? Like, what does this really mean if I wear something with that logo on it? What tribe am I part of, right? And if that's not clear, that's a problem for the brand.
Hmm.
And it's also a problem, most importantly, for the people that work for the brand, because you don't have any guidelines anymore, right? Or you make shit up. You just
Yeah.
create these artificial guidelines that don't really mean anything. So just by nature of giving our brand the name NoBull, we literally don't have to create a lot of design filters, right? That we don't have to every season figure out, okay, what's the theme for this season and what are we going to do and how are we going to be different from the last one? Because the brand itself gives it a definition, right?
Hmm.
If it's a gimmick, we don't put it on product, right? Do we have fun with colors and graphics and things like that? Absolutely. But from a performance perspective, the product is as distilled and simple as possible, right? And we always look for this next best material that can help us achieve that, but we're not achieving it through putting lots of crap on product, whether it's apparel or footwear. So that helps a lot, and that's going to also help when we grow, because as long as we define that the same way always, no matter what sport we design for, then that's a natural filter already that everything has to go through, and the team knows about that.
Yeah. Um, it's been incredible to watch the, I guess, like socially distanced shooting sessions taking place with Tia and Catherine and Brooke, and watching like say little sneak peeks and snippets and small little like videos and stuff. Watching it all come together. I think it seems like despite COVID, because of your model and the fact that you use like viral conceptual pieces and stuff, things seem to be going like ridiculously well.
Yeah, no, I think it was tough initially because we also had new product that we had to shoot, right? And at some point we couldn't do that anymore because
Hmm.
none of the team members could leave their house when we had stay-at-home orders. So there were definitely a couple of weeks to months, March, April, May, right, where it was much tougher. But I think we've found our rhythm now, and we've also been really creative. Again, nothing I had anything to do with, but the team has been super creative with, if we can't travel to a location, let's hire somebody there, right, to
Hmm.
help us shoot that. They gave them really specific guidelines over Zoom to make sure that they shoot it in a way where it reflects our brand. And then a lot of the post and editing goes on in house with our team. So I'm I'm amazed by what the team was able to pull off given the circumstances, right, with COVID and everything.
Yeah. I think as well, like, so there was a lot of gut punches in 2020. Like, for if you were, if you happen to be a black CrossFitter, you
Hmm.
were basically fucked in
Yeah.
2020. So you
Yeah.
had, like, all the racial issues coming to a head. You had all the, like, Glassman controversy with CrossFit coming to a head, and you had COVID on top of it. So, like, shit time. But I think one thing, and I remember, I think I messaged Todd about it at the time, was I was in awe of the reaction of, like, the company, like the NoBull company, the people that work for it, and then the athletes that work with it. Like, okay, like, say the Black Lives Matter, Marcus put out uh in-depth, like, personal uh video explanation of his thoughts on it and how he felt, and his perception of things as they were happening. I think that takes guts to do that, because it's easy to just say, like, oh fuck it, someone else to do it, I just won't. I
Yeah.
think the athletes, like with the CrossFit controversy, like, Katrin immediately, like, so quickly put something, and then others followed suit. And there was, I think, I don't know, like, I don't know if it was apparent to everyone maybe, but I think I was just like, oh, like, Katrin said she's out, like, geez, that's a pretty big deal, like. And it
Yeah.
was a detailed post, and then it was like, oh, Brooke as well, and Tia. I was like, geez. Wait, I was like, geez, they're all noble athletes. And then I was kind of like watching. Even the thing I admired as well was not just the fact that they were, say, that Marcus put something out with the Black Lives Matter movement, or Katrin put something out. It was like the support, like, underlaying it and around it, like the messages of support and the sharing with support and stuff, I think was incredibly admirable. And I think, as one of the patriarchs of the company, that must fill you with an enormous sense of pride that I guess the ethos of the company shone through in what otherwise was a really shit time.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you picked up on that. So first of all, none of that was orchestrated, right? I
Mm,
mean, that's again, that speaks to the team that we built and the athletes that we partner with. That was genuine. They needed to make those statements because that's what they believed, right? And this is
mm,
their livelihood. I mean, they compete for a living, right? So they're putting everything on the line when they make these statements. But there was no other choice. There was no side to take, right? It was that's the only viable side to stand on when it
yeah.
comes to racism and lack of diversity or the ability to see these things. And we just had to distance ourselves from these statements, whether it was personal or as a company. And another thing that we talked about a lot was, okay, especially with Black Lives Matter and everything that happened and inclusivity, we don't want to just talk. Like a lot of, and this is awesome that brands are doing that. By no means do I want to diminish kind of the effects that donations have, that brands make, but I do think a lot of brands, like, and it feels like that. It feels like they're checking a box, right? It's like, okay, we want to support this cause. Here's a donation that we're making, and then we never have to talk about it again. And we were on that trajectory, and rightfully so. Marcus pushed back hard, right? And we had a lot of conversations about that. I was like, listen, we got to do something because we stand united with, we are about inclusivity. And can we be better? Absolutely. We have a lot of work to do as a team, as an athlete team, to become more diverse. But we are working on that. But the when we had a choice to just make a statement and say, okay, a certain percentage of proceeds for this particular project is going to go to this cause, and then we never have to talk about it again. We said, no, let's not do that. Let's really start by listening to each other, having conversations first as a team, right, internally, because that's where it starts.
Mm,
And we had a lot of conversations in workshops internally, um, with separate groups coming together as a whole team, whoever wanted to be involved as well. What inclusivity means, right? What does it mean for us? What can we do as individuals? What can we do as a company? And in the end, what we ended up realizing was this is not a one-time thing where we give back. This is a fundamental change and journey that we have to go on to become educated ourselves, whatever that means for an individual, but also become better as a company.
yeah.
And that's why at some point we said, let's not talk about this anymore. We just got to do it, right? And that's what's happening. So because we've gotten some flack from the community, well, why haven't you posted about this or that, or what are you doing? Where's your donation, right? There's a lot of work going on that we are putting in internally, and a lot of things that we are doing to address it. But we are not just shouting about it, right? If that makes
Yeah.
sense. So again, I just want to make sure there's a disclaimer that we're not perfect and we have a lot to learn, but we're doing as much as we can to make sure that the team knows what it means to be inclusive, that we get challenged ourselves, and that we are opening to listening and learning from that and then moving forward in a better way.
Yeah.
And, and I think what's happening now with CrossFit, I mean, the immediate reaction was, and that was the right thing to do for people to step back and say, listen, we don't want to be part of this. But there's corporate, right? And then there is the community. And the community is not racist, right? Are there people in there that are not about inclusivity? Absolutely.
Mm.
You find that everywhere in life. But in general, I think CrossFit is a very welcoming community. And I've experienced that traveling all over the world. It doesn't matter whether you're in South Korea, in Japan, in China. You can drop into any CrossFit box and you feel like there's a little bit of home in that because you're used to, working out as a community and they welcome you and you can just drop in and it's awesome. And that's a reflection of why I think it grew so much globally. I think the new leadership now with Eric Rosa, I have nothing but positive thoughts about that and where that's going. I think he's going to do an amazing job to bring the community back, right? Because that's really what it's about.
Mm. Um, you have honestly no idea how excited I was when I saw Alex Smith start wearing NoBull t-shirts. When I was like, he was like hanging around Nashville, and I was like, oh, he's wearing a NoBull t-shirt, and I was like, oh, it's just because he's hanging out with Brooke. And then I was like, oh, they're NoBull shorts, they're NoBull shoes. I was like, he's fucking nobled up the eyeballs. I was like, there's a lot of noble going on. Then he put up his post saying that he's joining as an athlete. I cannot fucking tell you how much I love Alex Smith. Like
That's awesome.
he's okay, like athletically, like he's ridiculously gymnasty and just
That's
insanely
great.
strong as well. Like I think as well though, like he's hilarious and unashamedly himself, which seems to be, like you mentioned or alluded to anyway, like it's part of the NoBull brand.
Yeah.
But like as well as that, going in line with Marcus's video about racism and the girls coming out in support of like the CrossFit community, I guess. Like he's also brave because I suppose like it shouldn't need to be considered brave, but it was brave for him to come out when he did, especially so publicly and so openly. I fucking love Alex Smith. So I was like, oh hell yes. When I knew I was going to be talking to you and when I knew he had signed up, like I absolutely fucking love him. I think I remember like 2017 or something, 2016, I think 2017. I had watched, he was one of the first like CrossFitters I followed on Instagram just by total fluke. I think he came up in my search or something like that. And I followed him and I was like, Jesus, this guy can do like ridiculous stuff. Like he's so good at like, because you know, when you have nothing else to compare to, I was like,
Right.
he's the best Olympic lifter I've ever seen. He's the best at pull-ups I've ever seen. He's the
Yeah.
best at everything I've ever seen. And then I remember going into the gym being like, Alex Smith's going to win the games. And everyone's like, who the fuck is Alex Smith? And like, no, he's not going to win the games. I was like, oh, I'm telling you, he's going to win. But and still the next year I was like, Alex Smith's going to win the games. I just absolutely love him. So I think kudos on getting him involved because I think that's great. Um, what that long-winded praise of Alex Smith is getting around to the question of what is the process, or is there a concrete process in finding someone to work with? Does it happen like organically, or is there like an approach that's nearly systemic, or is it just something that kind of like happens by chance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it happens organically, which is, there's just, I think different brands approach it differently, right? Some brands just bring athletes in, write a check, and there's not really a relationship,
Mm,
especially when you get big as a brand and you have hundreds or thousands of athletes. It's harder and harder. It becomes harder and harder to have these relationships, right? And like I said in the beginning, we're trying to keep our athlete team as small as it needs to be where we can have these personal relationships. So, um, for example, Sam Dancer, the way that happened was when we first launched the brand, he came by our booth and he was like, "Who are you guys?" And we were like, "Who are you?" Right? He's like this crazy looking dude, like
Yeah.
fit out the wazoo, like scary 600+ pound deadlifting guy comes by and like picks up our shoes and is like, "Oh, I don't know what this is, but I like what I see." And that turned into a year-long courtship where, you know, we sent him product to tear apart, which he did, and then he gave us feedback, and eventually we started talking about potentially teaming up, and he was, and rightfully so, and it was awesome, and kudos to him. He said, "Listen, I just don't want to be sponsored by a company. I want to feel really good about who I'm working with and also the team specifically," right? And that's why we made it happen with Sam over time. We felt good about him, he felt good about us, right? And that's,
Mm.
I think that's true for every single athlete that we have a relationship with. The same happened with Brooke, for example, Brooke Wells. She Somebody sent us a post, an Instagram post, said, "Hey, who is this girl that just won the regionals, this event in the regionals with wearing your shoes?" And we were like, "We don't know who that is," right? Turns out she was friends with some people in her box, and you know, Jared Stevens and other
Yeah.
people, and was working out with them, and they had an extra pair of shoes that we sent to them. And then she tried them on, they fit her, and all of a sudden she wins a regional event. And we're like, "Holy crap, who is that?" Right? And then a couple months later, all of a sudden, we're sitting somewhere in Boston having a conversation. So a lot of it was organic through relationships and people wearing our product. Caleb Dressel, for example, which is, you know, I don't know if you've heard about that, but he's an Olympic level, Olympic Games level swimmer, won some gold medals, was supposed to be kind of the, you know, if Tokyo had happened this
Yeah.
year, front runner overall in all sports, but specifically in swimming, obviously, amazing athlete, and it's going to happen hopefully next year. But he was a customer. He's been a customer for a couple of years. So
Yeah.
he posted with a NoBull t-shirt on a couple of years ago, and we had no idea, right? So that's how these relationships start usually. And the same with Alec. Alec is in Nashville. Brooke is in Nashville. They train together. I met Alec last year at the film festival that we hosted in Brooklyn,
Mm.
at an event after the film festival. We just had an amazing conversation there. And that's the first time I actually got to spend time with him. Such a humble guy. And again, to my point earlier about not having an ego, he's just a fun guy, whether it's, you know, talking to him or watching him work out. And now he
Yeah.
obviously does a lot of programming and stuff, but it's just surreal what that guy can do athletically. But it's always fun to watch, right? His persona fits really well with what we're doing, and he's not taking himself too serious, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's like I figured that would be the case considering you're working with him, but it's still a relief to hear that someone that you love is like what you hoped they'd be, you know, that kind of way. Is there any exciting products then in the pipeline? Is there anything like that you're
Lots.
yeah, that'd be
I'll
worrying
say
if
right
you were
now,
like that'd be worrying if you were like, no, nothing.
yes, but where I'm going with that is, right, and you can kind of see the trajectory that the brand has taken. We started with training in the gym,
Mm.
and that was our first product. A lot of CrossFit athletes and people that train in the gym also go for runs, right? So that was our next kind of product evolution. Um, a lot of CrossFit athletes that run with people that don't do CrossFit, right? So all of a sudden, people started buying our running shoes that don't necessarily know anything about CrossFit. They're
Mm.
just runners, even though we haven't really marketed to the running community. And then running is going really well for us, by the way. So it made us realize um, that this is really about a mindset and it's not about a category, right? Will CrossFit and training always be kind of the focal point of what we do? Absolutely. It's all about training for us and putting the work in every day. But you train for a lot of different sports, right? And a lot of different sports are training. So what we're going to do is not necessarily limit ourselves to certain categories, but really apply this NoBull mindset to the product that we create for different usage scenarios, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
without
yeah,
giving too much away, but that's kind of where it's going.
yeah. You've given fuck all away there, to be honest.
No,
Uh,
I mean, there's a huge opportunity for us
mm,
to participate in a lot of different sports. It's not just about CrossFit, but it is. I think what's so cool about CrossFit is that it is a sport by itself. But the reason I do CrossFit is not because I wanted to go to the games, because that would have never happened and will never happen, even if I had started in my 20s. But I'm just genetically not set up for that. But it allows me to do things now at my age. I'm over 50, right? So I
mm,
can still do stuff that I absolutely love doing athletically. And I do think CrossFit has a lot to do with it
mm.
because it prepares me to participate in mountain biking, skiing, snowboarding, kiteboarding, surfing, like all the stuff that I want to do. CrossFit preps me for that, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's such an important part of our DNA and what we do. It's all about functional training and putting the time in to be ready for the other stuff that you want to do as well.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask, what are your hopes for the company for, say, in 5 years' time? Are you like a vision board kind of guy? Are you like a,
Yeah, we are, but it's more like conversations
yeah,
and just shooting the shit. Um, Obviously, we have a plan, but what we've learned is that plans change usually for the better very quickly. So we've had aspirations, we've had certain revenue goals in mind. In the beginning, I remember meetings from 2015 where we're like, okay, when are we going to hit this number and that number? And we've exceeded all those. But but also we've had a lot of like challenges, right? Where we had to be nimble, like product delays, shipping delays, COVID. We had to change direction on a dime and re-strategize. So you have to remain nimble, and can you have goals for what's going to happen in 5 years? Absolutely, but who knows what's going to happen in 5 years, right?
yeah.
So what we do know though is that international obviously is going to be a huge aspect of that.
Yeah, well, your worldwide website now is, I
Yeah,
nearly shat my pants because before, when I used to go on to NoBull, there was like, maybe 10 things, and I could
yeah,
get stuff through like weight in London. And
yeah.
then I think it was Todd again, put something up about a website or whatever. And I went on, I was like, oh my God, they make so much stuff. I was like scrolling through. It wasted about 3 days because just like there was so much stuff. I thought that like Noble made like 5 pairs of shoes and like 6 different t-shirts and a few pairs of shorts. And it was just pages and pages of stuff that hadn't been available. So like that must be exciting as well.
It's super exciting, and we're testing a lot of different things now, right? So I'm being from Europe. It hurt me deeply to not be able to offer the same product that we offer to our US based customers, but it was just not feasible, right?
Mm,
We have a distribution center in Europe. We only ship certain product to that. Um, we couldn't take too many risks, and it pissed people off, right? People are like, well, wait a minute, I want to buy this. Why do I have to import it from the States? So a lot of things are in the works there. We're still trying to figure out what the best, from an operational perspective, what the best solution is for going outside of the US. But it's definitely a huge focal point of what we're doing right now in terms of making sure that customers outside the US can also have the same experience when it comes to product, but also from a logistics, shipping, customer service, all that stuff obviously is critically important.
yeah. Well, listen, I'm off to buy some duck yellow nobles.
That's
So
awesome.
enjoy the rest of your day and your explosions.
Yep. Hopefully not many more. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me on. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
That was
Thanks for coming. Thanks very much.